I did, but the audio clicked off. Sorry about that.
Is it on?
It is on.
Okay, technical difficulties, chat. So tonight is just a kind of a preamble. It's a look at where we are right now. By Friday, when we receive our funding, our financial services staff will be looking at the funding announcements and trying to work these numbers. So hopefully, if we receive more funding than we anticipate, we'll be back on March 30th with a different outlook. But in conversations with partners of School District 61, there was requests to come out in advance so that people had a heads up and it wasn't done as quickly as perhaps it has been done. So that's what tonight is about. Our Secretary Treasurer is going to go through a PowerPoint presentation that'll kind of capture information about budget in general terms, and then very specifically about our school district, the reasons why we have a structural deficit that continues each year, how we have mitigated the structural deficit in previous years, and a pretty good look at where are the areas that we actually can reduce when we need to, because there's not a lot. As you'll see in the presentation, there's very few areas that is in the discretion of the board to reduce when we need to. So that's what tonight is. It is just a presentation. There's no, we won't be engaging in any conversations because it's preliminary numbers. So what'll happen next? We have spring break coming up for 2 weeks on March 30th. We have a public meeting, and at that meeting, Secretary Treasurer Katrina Stride will go over where we are now after we receive the provincial funding, and then the public meeting and public engagement. There'll also be an online opportunity for people to give feedback to the budget. There'll be a face-to-face at SJ Willis at 6:30 on the 30th for people to give face-to-face feedback. It will be live streamed, so people can watch the presentation from home and also give feedback from home if that's how they choose to give feedback, or they can attend the meeting. So there's some options there. So with that, I think at this point, I'll pass the motion to approve the agenda and pass it over to Secretary Treasurer Katrina Stride. I'm in blue. Wait for the slideshow. Good evening, everyone. You can go to the next slide. And the next one. So we're just gonna start off the meeting, just doing a bit of a budget overview. Before we get into information that is specific to 2026, 2027. And the budget overview, when we get into the numbers, will be based on 2025, 2026. So the annual budget. And once we have final numbers, we can update those slides with the 2026, 2027 ones. So starting off here, this is the budget cycle. And if you look at the top in February, we submitted our enrollment projection for next year to the ministry. And in the same month, we also approved the amended annual budget for the year that we're in right now. So going to the right, in March, actually this week, we'll receive the funding announcement from the ministry. It will be based on those projections that were submitted in February. The official trustee will approve the budget for next year in April. And then we go through our staffing processes. Students show up in September, and then we submit reports to the ministry. And they recalculate the operating grant for next year. And we get that information in December, and then it just starts all over again. The next slide.
With the annual budget, we are required to budget for all three funds, so that's operating, special purpose, and capital. The information that we'll be sharing this evening will be focused on the operating fund. The operating revenues. Provincial grants make up 91.2% of our revenue. And 8.8% is for everything else, so that's international tuition, rentals, leases, investment income, and other revenue. Of the provincial grants, 77.7% of that is based on our enrollment. And 22.3% is based on other factors, student characteristics and district factors. But only Indigenous education funding is targeted. This graph shows our enrollment trends, and you can see that it was trending upwards. There's a dip there during COVID. And then in 24-25, we were at 20,074. And then you can see for the current year, we had a slight decline, and we're projecting another decline for 26-27. For international, this one was trending upwards, and then COVID happened. Had a bit more significant impact on international, and it hasn't fully recovered back to where it was before. We are projecting 792, and for next year, projecting just slightly lower than that, 719. And always like to remind people, with international education, we take a percentage of their gross revenue off the top. And then that contribution helps support activities and expenses across the entire district. For 25-26, that contribution was about 6.5 million. And then looking at operating expenses for 25-26, salaries and benefits make up 92.3%. Everything else is 7.7%. So that's everything from toilet paper to technology. When we look specifically at our staffing, not surprisingly, 59.3% of our staff are teachers. And then the next highest groups are educational assistants at 12.1%. And support staff at 11.4%, and you can see the rest of them there. We can also break down our operating expenses by function. And so there's 4 different functions that are tracked. Instruction is the delivery of learning experience, so that's anything related to the classroom. That's 85.5%. District administration, that's the function of running the district, so those would be the departments like financial services, HR, IT, that's 2.6%. Operations and maintenance, 11.2% is basically facilities, all of our facilities and technology, and then transportation and housing is at 0.7%. This slide shows those functions compared to the provincial average. So we are slightly higher in instruction, lower in district admin, fairly close in operations and maintenance, and lower in transportation.
We're gonna pause for a moment. Lucky for the people that are here, and you can see this, we're having a glitch with being projected on the live stream. So we'll stop because I'd like it to work. So if we could just take a few minutes and see if we can not put any pressure at all until it's not sure this works. So please talk amongst yourselves. I'll pull you back together in a few minutes.
Wow.
And I say
See a slide.
Yeah.
Oh. I see a slide. You try to talk to us. Same slide.
If things good now, fine.
Like, we can see us, like, I can see that there's a slide, but it's not the presentation. Like, it's not advanced at all, same slide.
Right, right. I'm seeing online, like a live stream that is in the game, it's like, but that's in our Zoom meeting.
Okay.
So I think that we could,
Okay, great.
it's gonna look a little different out here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's.
Yeah, so it's gonna look like. Okay.
Got it.
Yeah, so.
People understand that's working.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah.
So you're hearing from people that are
Now I
actually watching.
can.
Excellent, well, let us know if it's not.
I can advance it here now.
I don't know, so who could advance it?
I can't advance it here, but there
Yeah. I do believe that. I think I see it as Last time.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, I think next. Okay, yeah. All right, I think we're good to go. Yeah. Back over to Katrina. Okay, we've also included this slide, question had come up previously around how do we compare to other school districts? We chose the 4 other school districts that are closest to us in our student FTE, so this shows that comparison.
Yeah, the slides, or will the slides be posted online?
Yes,
Oh,
yeah, they will be.
What's your source saying, Tom?
This, I still see it on the, I still see the slide.
Okay.
That's exactly it.
Okay, all right, try this again.
I think we're good with that. So I'm just moving into our current financial situation. You can't see that there. The top says, what is the structural deficit? We get asked that question a lot. What it is, it's when we have, budgeted expenditures that are greater than our budgeted revenue. And historically, our school district has used either prior year surplus or one-time reductions in order to cover that gap. It's only permanent ongoing, reductions or permanent ongoing new revenue that will eliminate that structural deficit. So our projected structural deficit, as Sherry was mentioning, we don't have our, ministry funding levels yet. We will be getting them on Thursday. So all the numbers that we'll be presenting this evening are going to be based on the 25-26 funding levels. Our estimated structural deficit right now, using those funding levels, is 5.1 million. And we already have approved by the official trustees 3.6 million of surplus, some from the end of 24-25, some projected to be available at the end of the current year, up to 3.6 million. So our current shortfall is 1.6 million. This just shows you basically what I just said, with the preliminary numbers compared to where we were at last year. Now, keeping in mind that last year, these were numbers that were presented in April with the ministry funding levels updated. So we were sitting with a shortfall of 1.7. Right now, as mentioned, based on prior year funding levels, we're sitting at a deficit of 1.6. And this slide just shows some of the reasons why we would be in a situation to have a structural deficit. So the first thing, which you can't see on the top there, is when we're building the budget for each year, any reductions that were made in the previous year that were one time have to be added back. So that's the first thing. Declining enrollment will also impact our deficit. Declining interest rates, that impacts our investment income. Non-enrolling staffing levels greater than our collective agreement. Also, programs that are not funded by the ministry. So those would be like decisions that we've made in the past to fund things. An example of that might be like music. And unfunded inflationary costs. So most common ones that we see are software renewals and service contracts. And then unfunded costs just in general. So our benefits increase with the premiums, and also as employees use them, then the rates go up. Step increments. So if you have employees that have steps, I'll use teacher as an example. They get their master's degree and they go up to the next step. Those kinds of increases are not funded by the ministry. And also replacement costs for absences. So we've seen an increase in the average number of absences for employees, and we have to budget for those replacements. But there's also unavoidable costs. So every 4 years, we have to build in a cost for the trustee election. And so we share costs with the municipalities for that. And then last on the list there, but certainly not the only item left, is technology replacement. So our student devices have a student ratio. And so any of those purchases to keep us up to ratio, and replacing aging technology. And so as we have been working through the budget process, we've been categorizing the expenses into different areas. And the first one is collective agreement obligations. So these are areas that we're not really able to do anything with because we have collective agreement language around them. So Based on enrollment, based on class size and composition, we'll have teachers that are in the classroom who need to be there to teach the students that we have in the schools. We also have non-enrolling teachers within staffing ratios. So collective agreement says there needs to be a certain number of librarians or counselors per a certain number of students. So professional development is another one, and also benefits. There are quite a few different expenses that are in our budget that don't have collective agreement obligation. And these are just examples. There's 2 pages of examples. Music is listed there. Middle music is at 1.2 million. So this is what we have currently in our budget that we spend. We're not obligated to do that. It's a choice that we've made. So middle music, 1.2, elementary strings, 140,000. Instrument repairs, 50,000. And then some miscellaneous at 40,000. We spent 140,000 on athletics. And we also have made a choice to fund non-enrolling teachers in excess of the staffing ratio, for example, counselors. And the perfect example of that is in our elementary schools, we staff a minimum of 0.5 FTE in every school. Early learning and childcare. So we made a choice to put early childhood educators in kindergarten classes. 993,000, and that's coming out of the operating budget. There are also ECs that are funded in special purpose fund. Strong Start is the special purpose grant that we receive for ECs, and we also supplement that by 42,000 out of our operating fund. And then looking at inclusive learning, we receive ministry funding for students with designations, and there's levels 1, 2, and 3. We also supplement that funding, so over and above that funding, we put in $12.2 million. Pathways and partnerships, and we do receive some funding from Skilled Trades BC for the programming that they offer. Will we supplement that from operating at 1.2 million? And then lastly, these areas are also not, there's no collective agreement obligation, but there is a service obligation that's tied to them. So just highlighting them departments, for example, the departments need to exist to pay staff and various other things. Inclusive learning, speech, language pathologists, psychologists, occupational therapy, physical therapy, orientation and mobility, all of those items combined are 3.3 million. Mental health, so youth and family counselors, these are contractors, so not employees, YFCs we call them. 1.7 million is spent on that. And then student transportation, so that is including busing for inclusive learning students. And also busing for students who live outside of walk limits that we set. So the Thetisvale area, we provide busing to those students. And then we have some crossing guard services that we provide that are unfunded by the municipality. The total of those is 1.4 million. And then lastly, technology. So network infrastructure. So this is like access points for Wi-Fi. And we have student and staff devices, printers, and also tech packages. So the projectors in classrooms, 1.9 million. So as we are considering the $1.6 million deficit, these are some items that are under consideration to help balance the budget. And as we mentioned, all of the numbers that are presented today are preliminary. So we will be presenting this again on March 30th with the updated numbers. So This page has the one-time reductions that are being proposed. A network infrastructure, a reduction of 155,476. And we can do this because some projects will be delayed until next year, or 27-28. Staff devices, a reduction of 365,000. And some purchases will be delayed until 2027-2028. In the information technology for learning department, 147,102 is a reduction, one time. It's a temporary restructure of department leadership. The director is being seconded. And so there's a 1.0 acting district principal position that will be held vacant for the year. And then moving now into ongoing reductions. Counseling specific to continuing education. So a reduction of 27,966. This is a 0.2 FTE counselor. There's low program enrollment. This is for adult students. And SJ Burnside's current counseling allocation is able to support these adult students. Pathways and Partnerships Aviation Program. You would have seen this one on the list as a temporary reduction in previous years. 44,850. We've been unable to fill this specialty teaching position. Other career prep programs though do remain available to students such as TASK and Auto Tech. And then Pathways and Partnerships Career Centers. This is a reduction of 259,946. So each secondary school will receive one linear career center teaching block. So that's one block throughout the entire year. Some schools currently have 2 to 3 blocks. And I note that career center coordinators, the QP position hours will remain the same at all schools. Also, Pathways and Partnerships, a reduction of 139,831. This is a restructure to the department, moving from a district vice principal and one teacher, from a district vice principal and 2 teachers. We're moving to a district vice principal and 1 teacher in this proposal. And then also Pathways and Partnerships, an $8,000 reduction. Specific to the CES conference and not no longer being able to support attendance at that conference. And note that the budget for program supplies and services is not otherwise impacted. Middle school music, a reduction of 250,871. Middle schools will continue to offer concert band 6, 7, and 8. And strings 6, 7, and 8. And elementary and secondary school music will continue as is. More ongoing reductions, itinerant support, a reduction of 69,916. So this is a 0.20 FTE speech and language pathologist, a 0.1 FTE psychologist, the 0.2 FTE deaf and hard of hearing teacher. These are current vacancies and temporary positions that won't be filled, so there isn't anyone in a position to be laid off. Inclusive learning, student transportation, a reduction of 165,921. The criteria for riding the bus as an inclusive learning student has been set, so only eligible riders will receive busing in 26-27, resulting in fewer runs. So the current cost per rider is 8,921. And early childhood educators, a reduction of 159,660. So this is 3.0 FTE ECE in kindergarten classes. They will be prioritized for consideration in the allocation of inclusive learning contingency, should there be that available. Also, just to note that EC's in Strong Start will remain the same. And the last ongoing reduction is youth and family counselors, a reduction of 44,558. So as mentioned, all schools have access to a minimum 0.5 FTE teacher counselor. Every school will continue to have access to YFCs. 14 of our school prioritized schools have dedicated YFCs. Contracted hours may be slightly reduced for some schools. And then there are some one-time additions. The EA mentor, you remember last year was added back. We're adding that, extending it for another year, 29,533. This is net of 36,000 that's already included in the budget. Student devices, we need to add 150,000. And that's to purchase Chromebooks in order to maintain the current student device ratio, which is 4:1 at elementary and 3:1 at middle and secondary. And then privacy management program, an addition of 38,486. And this is a result of the privacy management program legislation that was put in that requires us to do privacy impact assessments for any software applications that we use in classrooms and departments, anything that collects personal information. So let's put this aside to contract out to complete privacy impact assessments on district-wide software applications. And I think this is the last one. Management strategy. So 52,960 is required due to an increase in the cost of print device replacement. And a note that the number of printers remains the same, it's just a cost escalation. Yeah, that is the list of considerations. And then Sherry's already mentioned this, but we will have another special budget meeting on March 30th. It will be held at SJ Willis, hopefully live streamed, and we'll present the budget. Will be more fulsome budget presentation with some variances because we will have our final ministry operating grant. And there will be opportunity either in that meeting or after, or if unable to attend, all the documents will be online and there'll be an opportunity to provide feedback online as well.
Thank you. So that concludes the preliminary budget meeting for tonight. I hope people that were watching online, people that are here have a better understanding of how we got to this place of having an over $5 million deficit and how we're trying to manage that with preliminary numbers. More to come on the 30th. Also on the 30th, we will be presenting any kind of patterns or comments or questions that have come to us that or things that people don't understand or misunderstand. We'll be clarifying those at that meeting, and then there'll be a lot of opportunity after that for feedback before the final decisions are made. So thank you all for coming tonight, and that concludes